The Oilers are currently that squad that used to be excellent but is now suffering. They won 5 Stanley Cups between 1984 and 1990. 4 of their players were named to the top 10 NHL teams of all time, and the Oilers were chosen the NHL's greatest team in its first 100 years. So how did the team achieve such great heights of success before collapsing? This is the story of the Edmonton Oilers' rise and demise. The starting point. The Edmonton Oilers were one of the 12 inaugural World Hockey Association or WHA franchises on November 1, 1971. Dr. Charles A. Chuck Allard and Wild Bill Hunter were the initial team founders. Hunter also formed the Canadian Major Junior Hockey League and controlled the Edmonton Oil Kings junior hockey team. The NHL, however, had rejected Hunter's efforts to bring big professional hockey to Edmonton via an expansion NHL club. As a result, Hunter turned to the fledgling WHA. Hunter chose the name Oilers for the new WHA franchise. This was once used as a nickname for the Edmonton Oil Kings in the 1950s and 1960s. The Oilers were renamed the Alberta Oilers after the newly formed Calgary Broncos disbanded prior to the start of the inaugural WHA season, since it was planned to share their home games between Edmonton and Calgary. The team eventually played all of its home games in the Edmonton Gardens and changed its name back to the Edmonton Oilers the following year, possibly for financial reasons or to enable for a less complicated return of the WHA to Calgary. They defeated the Ottawa Nationals 7-4 in the inaugural game in WHA history. The team's fortunes changed considerably in 1978 when their new coach Satho was instrumental in bringing in underage youngster Wayne Gretzky. The Oilers finished first in the WHA standings in 1978-1979 with a league-best 48-32 record. However, Edmonton was unable to win the Stanley Cup, falling in the finals to the Winnipeg Jets. Following a merger deal between the two leagues, the Oilers joined the NHL in 1979-80. The early years of the NHL. The Oilers lost the majority of its players in 1978-79 when the NHL held a reclamation draft of players who had defected to the fledgling league. They were given permission to safeguard 2 goalkeepers and 2 skill players. Initially, Gretzky was not eligible for protection. Under the rules in effect at the time, he would have been placed in the entry draft pool. Pocklington, on the other hand, had signed him to a 21-year contract in 1979, and he used it to force the NHL to admit the Oilers. He promised the league that Gretzky would fill every arena, but that because he was under a personal services contract with Pocklington, the only way Gretzky could enter the NHL was as an Oiler. The NHL agreed to let the Oilers protect Gretzky. The Oilers were assigned to the Campbell Conference's Smythe division upon their entry into the NHL. In their first 2 seasons, they finished 16th and 14th in the regular season, respectively. However, because 16 of the 21 NHL teams made the playoffs at the time, the Oilers were still able to give their young players playoff experience, which clearly paid off. In 1983-84, the Edmonton Oilers dominated the regular season, ending with the best record in the NHL for the first time in franchise history. They set a franchise record by winning 57 games and scoring 119 points. They set a record with 446 goals, which they still hold. Gretzky reached 200 points for the second time in his career, and the Oilers became the first team in NHL history to have 3 players score more than 50 goals. Gretzky, 99, Curry, 54, and Anderson, 51. 52. Finally, Paul Coffey became the NHL's second defenseman to score 40 goals in a single season. He ended with a total of 126 points. The Dynasty. The Oilers swept the Winnipeg Jets in the Smythe Division semi-finals. The Oilers had a tougher challenge in the division finals against the Calgary Flames, but ultimately prevailed in Game 7, defeating their provincial rivals 7-4 after trailing 4-3 midway through the second period. The Oilers earned a repeat with the Islanders in the Stanley Cup Finals by sweeping the Minnesota North Stars in the conference finals. The Oilers split the first 2 games on Long Island before winning 3 straight in Edmonton to become the first former WHA team to win the Stanley Cup and the first Western Canadian team to do so in 59 years. 8 Oilers were chosen to represent Canada at the 1984 Canada Cup. As a result, the Oilers were not as dominant in 1984-85 as they had been in the previous year. In order to stay as fresh as possible, the team did not press as hard during the regular season, and Sather even took a week off in Hawaii in the middle of the season. Despite this, the Oilers finished second in the NHL with 49 victories and 109 points, 4 points behind the Philadelphia Flyers. Gretzky got his 1,000th career point and only his 424th game on his way to an NHL-leading 73-goal, 208-point season. Kurri also broke through the 70-goal barrier, ending with 71 goals and 135 points. Paul Coffey finished his second straight season with 37 goals and 121 points. The Oilers swept the Los Angeles Kings in 3 games in the first round of the playoffs and the Winnipeg Jets in the division finals. In the Campbell Conference Finals, the team defeated the Chicago Blackhawks 2-0, extending their playoff victory streak to 9 games. Chicago tied the series on home ice, emphasizing hard and agitating play to impede the Oilers' offense, until the Oilers won the final 2 games to win the series in 6 games. The Oilers scored 44 goals against the Blackhawks, which is still an NHL record for one team in a single playoff series. And the Oilers defeated the Flyers in 5 games in the Stanley Cup Finals. Gretzky, Kurri, and Coffey were all named the NHL's first All-Star team, and the 1984-85 Edmonton Oilers were voted the NHL's greatest team of its first 100 years during the NHL Centennial Season celebrations. You as well can be voted as our channel's greatest subscriber, but you need to subscribe first. No promises, but maybe you'll end up with an award. The Oilers were a feared juggernaut throughout the NHL, but the off-ice antics of some players began to taint the team's image by the start of 1985-86 season. Dave Hunter was accused with impaired driving in June 1985. In February 1986, he was convicted and sentenced to 1 week in jail, which he served in the middle of the season. Then, on September 6, 1985, Marc Messier lost control of his Porsche and crashed into 3 parked cars, totaling it. He was eventually prosecuted with hit and run and careless driving and fined. Furthermore, the Oilers signed Craig McTavish, a talented defensive center from Boston who had recently served a year in prison for vehicular homicide. Despite the distractions, the Oilers finished the regular season as the top team in the NHL with 56 victories and 119 points. They earned the first President's Trophy, which is awarded to the team with the greatest regular season record. Gretzky set a new NHL record for points with 215 and a league record for assists with 163. Jari Kurri led the NHL with 68 goals and 131 points, while Paul Coffey set a new record for goals by a defenseman with 48. He finished with 138 points, 1 point shy of Bobby Orr's all-time record for defensemen. Furthermore, the Oilers tied a record set in 1983-84 by having 3 players score more than 50 goals: Kurri, 68, Glenn Anderson, 54, and Gretzky, 51. 52. The Oilers dominated the Vancouver Canucks in the divisional semi-finals, winning 3-0 and outscoring them 17-5. In the division finals, the Oilers met their most bitter foe, the Calgary Flames. The Oilers and Flames battled a memorable series through the first 6 games, with the decisive game being played April 30, 1986 at Northlands Coliseum, in a hard and often filthy series in which Flames enforcer Nick Fotiu actually tried to jump into the Oilers bench to get at Glenn Sather. Surprisingly, the Oilers' pursuit for a 3rd consecutive championship, the three-peat, was unsuccessful. On his 23rd birthday, rookie defenseman Steve Smith banked his breakout pass off goaltender Grant Furr's left skate into the Oilers' net in the 3rd period of a 2-2 game. Despite a late rush, the Oilers were unable to tie the game, and the own goal sealed the game and series. The Oilers came together as a team in the 1986-87 season, determined to reclaim the Stanley Cup. With the exception of a dismal record versus the Flames, Edmonton dominated the regular season once again, finishing first overall with 50 victories and 106 points, 6 points ahead of second-place Philadelphia. They likewise stormed through the playoffs, only to face the same opponent as in 1985, the Philadelphia Flyers, and beat them 3-1 to capture their 3rd Stanley Cup. The Oilers' success continued in the 87-88 season when they won their 4th championship, defeating the Boston Bruins 4-0. The following season, they moved Wayne Gretzky, the hottest player in the hockey world at the time, to the Los Angeles Kings, only for Gretzky to eliminate the Oilers in the first game of the playoffs while the entire world was watching. The following season, the Oilers bounced back, defeating the Los Angeles Kings in the playoffs before defeating the Bruins again for their 5th and final Stanley Cup championship. The downfall. The trade of Wayne Gretzky, as well as the immediate wage rise he received in Los Angeles, raised players' awareness of money issues significantly. This, combined with the NHLPA's decision to completely reveal every player's salary in the NHL, resulted in a new reality of fast-rising earnings in the NHL. In the summer of 1990, this truth began to take hold in Edmonton. Mark Messier sought a contract extension after winning the Hart Trophy the previous season. Messier wanted his compensation to be increased from $1.1 million to about $2 million per season, putting him ahead of everyone in the NHL except Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. Despite the fact that Messier was under contract with the Oilers through 1993, his agent and father, Doug Messier, continued to lobby Sather for a new contract. Jari Kurri, who was dissatisfied with the Oilers' offer, did not report to training camp and instead elected to spend the full season with HC Milano in Italy. Glenn Anderson, who had 2 years left on his 8-year contract, also skipped training camp, but returned once the season began. Following their victory, the club failed to win again, failing to make the playoffs for the next 5 seasons and reaching the finals only once in 2006 when they fell to the Carolina Hurricanes. They've only made the playoffs 4 times since then. If you want more of these documentary-style videos, you can watch this video to learn about the hardest shot in the NHL.